Helen, I'm so excited for this session. We're talking all about inviting in the joy of sanctuary in this summer season in the Western Hemisphere, because I know you're in Australia and you're about to enter winter. So thank you for being part of this series. I'm so excited to have you and to have this conversation today.
Oh, you're welcome, Sydney. Thank you for having me. It's beautiful to be here. And yes, even though that change of season, we can always talk about sanctuary no matter what season we're moving
Mhm,
into. So,
mhm. I love that. So for everyone that's, brand new to you and your work, I want to give a little intro. Helen is a home energy alchemist, sanctuary creator, and element space clearer, speaker and author and coach. And I just think your work is so interesting because I think prior to us meeting, I really wasn't familiar with the concept of sanctuary. So could we start there? Like, what even is sanctuary for anybody that's tuning in and is like me and was a newbie to this whole topic?
yeah. And I think we should start with what isn't sanctuary,
Mm,
because a lot of people, when they think of sanctuary, think perhaps of a display home or a beautiful hotel room or something that, externally looks beautiful and looks
mhm,
amazing. But sanctuary is actually a soul connection, and it's making that soul connection manifest in your own life. So, a really good example was I went and had a look at a display home near me. It was absolutely beautiful, but it had no soul to it.
mm,
So, sanctuary brings this depth of understanding to our lives, whether it's actually in our physical home, whether it's actually in our body, because our body is the home that we take absolutely everywhere with us, or whether it's in our life. So, we're kind of looking at all of those areas, home, body, and life. But we really want to bring in that beautiful soul connection, because if that supports us, and if that's connected with our truth, then it makes everything externally 1,000 times easier.
mm. I think it's so beautiful how you just defined it, that it's really about this soul connection. And we can have a soul connection with a person, a place, a thing. And so I'm curious, where's a good place to start to be able to tap into that for ourselves? Being able to tap into, even noticing for yourself if something is in fact a soul connection.
Yeah, it's the place that you want to go when life isn't really supporting you. So, where could that be, right? Or externally, it could be, nature, it could be at the beach, it could be at a friend's place, but maybe it's also your bed, or
Mm,
maybe it's holding on to your partner's hand, or connecting with something. It could be a book or it could be a movie, something that's really going to support you in those times when you really are feeling, say, discombobulated.
mhm,
So, depending on where you're at on your journey, is really where you'll start with this process. So, if you've already done a lot of inner work, a lot of inner transformational work, you'll start with seeing, looking, deciding whether your external environment matches that. And if it doesn't, you want to try and bring the two together.
mm.
If you're new to your journey of sanctuary, what you need to do, like, and you're going, I don't have any idea what I'm going to be doing here. Like, what is she talking about? What you need to do is look externally to you for a place or a space or a vibration that really brings all your senses in. So, what are you seeing that's beautiful? What are you hearing that's beautiful? What are you sensing, tasting, touching in this space that's beautiful? And I always come back to, for me, years ago, it was the day spa. So, I was going to this particular day spa and it was just divine.
Mm.
So, externally, I said, what is it about that? And I started to make those changes in my home to allow that inner transformation to happen.
Mhm. I love this. So it sounds like you could even start by looking at a photograph of a place or something that you really connect to, or going to that place to see, how does it make you feel? It sounds like everything that you've talked about so far is how does this person, place, or thing or moment make me feel? And if it makes me feel nourished or sort of lit up, from the inside out, it sounds like that's sanctuary. That's that soul connection for you.
It certainly is. And, the beautiful thing about that is you're using the emotions attached to, let's say, that photograph
Mm-hmm.
to bring about that internal shift. So I'm not talking about, let's looking at a photograph where the memory is sad.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at something that's really uplifting, because it's so easy to focus on what's not working,
So easy. Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
heaviness. So let's look at the beautiful photo of the baby we had who's now an adult. The joy that brought,
Mm-hmm.
or the holiday, that place that we went to, or just that connection that's visible to us, using that to really create that internal shift. I talk about the infinity symbol a lot. So it's this,
Yeah.
internal and
Yeah.
external flow.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful because, you used this word earlier, but I love when you said we've been, when you feel discombobulated. Like the last year, we have certainly felt discombobulated. And I think a lot of us still feel discombobulated. So, focusing on this element of sanctuary for yourself, I think, especially as we enter a new season, I think it's really beautiful and powerful because it is about focusing on the joy. It is about focusing on the light. What makes you feel the most like you, what's going to be exciting or passionate, or I'll say it again, joyful. I love this emphasis on really focusing on those moments, those memories, those things that can really, bring in that sense of calm or peace I think we're all really looking for, especially now.
Oh, definitely. And why wouldn't we? It's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
easy to watch the news or be pulled in that direction of heaviness or sadness or grief.
Hmm.
It's very important, that work from a spiritual perspective, that shadow work. But if we can do stuff daily, or even once an hour or once every half hour,
Hmm.
taking a breath, or looking at the sun, or having a cup of tea, or the simple things, it's those things that will really bring us back to our truth.
So I know you talk a lot about in your work sanctuary languages and that we each have maybe one or a few that we connect to. Could we talk a little bit about those and maybe how people can start to connect to their sanctuary language?
Definitely, this is something I'm super passionate about. So
Hmm.
thank you for asking.
Yeah, of course.
So once people have kind of done that, either where do I start, internally or externally stuff, the next step is really to have a look at the sanctuary languages. So you can also start here as well as another option. So
Mhm.
there's 4 sanctuary languages, and the idea is that you lead with 2. And I've already mentioned that infinity symbol. So one sits on one side of the infinity symbol and one sits on the other, and we flow between the 2. So the 4 are quiet solitude, physical activity, connection and collaboration, and creativity. Now, I'm just going to back up a little bit and say everyone wants to be all 4.
I know when you were mentioning the four, I thought, yes, 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 and yes.
Yes,
Like I feel
yes.
like I could check off the box on all four of them. That's so
Of
funny.
course. Of course. So let me give you a little bit of an example to help explain why
Yeah.
there's 2 as opposed to all 4 for you. So my sanctuary languages are quiet solitude and creativity. So what does that mean? That means Helen flows between her quiet solitude practices through over to her creativity practices, and that brings her back to this soul connection to make sanctuary manifest in my life. Now, does that mean that Helen does 0 physical activity? Of course not. Does it mean Helen does 0 connection and collaboration? Of course not. But what it means is that when things are going tough in my life, what are the things that I will default to?
Hmm.
I'm never going to default to going out running or other full on physical activity stuff.
Hmm.
And as much as I have beautiful friends and colleagues, I'm not going to default to connection and collaboration. I'm always going to go inwards and do that quiet solitude. And I'm always going to switch eventually to the creativity. And that can be anything from writing to, putting jewelry on, or it's not always just a canvas and paint.
Hmm.
So, what ones of those 2 do you think that you are, Sydney?
This is so hard. I think it's a combination of quiet and solitude because I'm thinking about moments when things are more difficult or uncertain, my default is to sort of retreat inward. So I think quiet and solitude. And then I also think, maybe this aspect of it's like a tie between collaboration and creativity, because also when I'm in those moments, my default is to want to create as a way to express myself, and part of my creation process is to collaborate with others. So maybe it's more so creativity. Yeah,
Yeah,
that might be it
yeah.
for
And
me. Yeah.
yeah, and you can use your creative pursuit. Someone did say to me a while ago, it wasn't you, but it was another podcaster, and she said, I think my podcast is my creative project. I go, there you go. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. So it's just saying, what is this thing that really brings me joy? And
Yeah.
what are the two sanctuary languages that I can connect with? Because ultimately, what we're trying to do here with these sanctuary languages and using that external shift and change is to create that truth for ourselves that allows us to really come back to ourselves.
Mm.
We have grown up in a society which, we have to look this way, or we have to behave this way, or our parents told us to do this, or whatever the case is. And this is a really gentle homecoming, really, to bring yourself back.
Totally. Totally. In so many ways, being able to identify your sanctuary language, or the two that you sort of go between, it feels like a beautiful vehicle to get to know yourself better. So it's a way to not only tap in and be able to express yourself, or find a sense of inner safety or connection, but also as a way to get to know yourself through the process. That's what it's sounding to me, at least.
Yeah. And for me, and I know I'm quite unique in that I'm an identical twin. And I
Yes.
think this is a really important part of this journey for me and discovery. And that's why I love sharing it with people, because I actually don't know how to be an individual, because
Mm.
it's for so many
You have
years.
that connection.
You have that connection and people think you're one, but you're two.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's learning, relearning in and amongst all of it. Who am I? How can I show up? And really importantly, how can I show up for me so that in part I can be a role model for whoever's around me, whether it's my partner, children, family, clients, colleagues. And I say
Mm-hmm.
that collectively. I'm not talking just about me. It's like if we can all stand up more in our own truth, the ripple effect of that will be quite enormous.
I think so too. And, part of, I think, what is so cool to me and what struck me about this idea of sanctuary and being able to identify for yourself your sanctuary language is also this ability to release any judgment, release any pressure that you might put on yourself. And I've been thinking a lot about this, and it's so interesting. It's been a theme in every conversation for this series. We feel a lot of pressure about, going back out into the world and experiencing the summer months. I mean, it's warmer. I feel like every time I think about the summer, I think about all the things I used to love to do as a kid, being outside, being with friends and family. And I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be out there, to, be socializing again in a way that we used to, pre-pandemic. And so being able to identify your sanctuary language, it feels like a great way to release any pressure or judgment that we may, you know, inadvertently kind of put on ourselves during this new season.
Definitely. And it makes it very easy eventually, once you've, sat with
Hmm.
them for a while and you've connected and you've started to see the shifts and changes, it actually makes it easier for you to get in alignment with whatever it is your thing is in
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
And goodness knows we need that right at the moment.
We need that. I think more than ever, we talk about this all the time on the podcast. And I know you and I have talked about this too when I was on your show. I think we each have something that we are uniquely gifted or talented in, that we really love, that we really enjoy. And oftentimes I think we lose sight of it. Like we get so mixed up in life and the pressures and the expectations, and what you spoke about so beautifully earlier too is like we are expected to be a certain way or taught to be a certain way in the world. And so you kind of lose that spark, or you lose that thing that really innately or inherently brings you joy. And so I think it's wonderful that Sanctuary can help you get back there.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I've had a conversation with a lot of people recently about what sanctuary is for them,
Mm-hmm.
because we often think, well, it should be this or it should be that or it should be whatever. And so, interestingly, one lady said to me, sanctuary for her was like being wrapped up in a beautiful shawl.
Mm.
Whereas another lady said sanctuary for her was that kind of modern Scandi look and feel to her home. Whereas another lady said that it was that connection with her grandkids. So that's full on heart energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some other people, it will be something totally different. It'll be purple walls with stars stuck all over it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, what do I actually believe and know about myself, and allowing that to come through in a really gentle way, using our sanctuary languages to support us so that we can step really strongly into whatever the next thing is on our journey, because we don't actually know what that is.
No.
And I talk a lot about the sanctuary toolkit. So it's like, what can I put in my toolkit that supports my sanctuary languages, that I can keep adding to it when things are great, because I know eventually things won't be great. Something will happen externally that will knock me for six. And so now I've got all these beautiful sanctuary practices in place. They're defaulted in my behavior. So I'm already going back to them to support me while this, challenging things going on in my life.
Hmm. Okay, so if someone is listening to this and they want to build a sanctuary toolkit for themselves, where is a good place to start? I mean, the way you just described it to me feels like it's practices, it's things that you enjoy that you can turn to in moments when I think you need a little extra support or nourishment. But how do you usually suggest people begin to fill up that toolkit for themselves?
So it can be a physical toolkit, or it can be a figurative
Yeah, yeah,
toolkit.
yeah. I love that.
Because you could write on a piece of paper meditation and put it in a little shoebox, because that's what your toolkit is. But
Hmm.
in your heart that meditation is something for you, then you already know that. You don't need to physically put it in your
Right,
toolkit.
right.
But the best place to start is to say, what have I done today that really made me feel great? And I'm going to use an example I did this years ago in Sydney. 31 Days of Sanctuary was a time when I was feeling really low. So what I did was I woke up every single day and I chose one thing to focus on that will bring me sanctuary. And then that one thing got put in my toolkit.
Hmm.
So one thing might have been the sunrise, might have been a cup of tea, it might have been patting my dog, it might have been my pillow. It
Hmm.
might have been the fact that I woke up and I'm breathing. So it depends on where you're at in your life. But what we're trying to do in this process is focus on what's making me feel great. And that's this real shift in this mindset and this real thinking, because it's easier to focus on what's not, particularly if you're in a difficult part of your life.
Hmm.
So if you need to create a literal box and put things in it, you might put in candles or a book or a skipping rope or whatever the things are, linking to your sanctuary languages. But then also, it's really important. I've been on this journey for a long time. And if I was sitting with the same sanctuary toolkit that I started with, I wouldn't have progressed as far as I have on this journey. So it's really important to kind of, go through the cobwebs, get rid of the things that don't suit you anymore,
Right, right.
replace them. So you don't get kind of stuck in a rut with where you're at. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense because we are constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. So, something that you might have relied on a decade ago may no longer resonate. And I think as humans, we sometimes don't trust that or we judge ourselves for it. Like if something worked for me before, why isn't it working for me now? Like why am I not using it now? And the truth is because you've grown and evolved and there was something else that resonates with you. And I think that's really beautiful. I also love, I don't know, I'm curious anyone that's listening in, feel free to add your thoughts and comments in the chat below, but I'm so like struck. I love this idea of creating like a physical box and decorating it and just, making this sort of sacred space for yourself and filling it with either scraps of paper of things that you can do that you can pull from, or literally putting in a candle, a book, or music or whatever. I just love this idea of having kind of like a physical manifestation for yourself of a toolkit of something that you can pull from, because I think a lot of us are visual in that way. Like we need something to pull from to know we've got that support for ourselves.
Definitely. And can you imagine how beautiful it would be if something was going on in your day and you just kind of go, oh, I feel like I need to connect with something. You could put your hands on that box and you could open it up and it
I
could be
love it.
beautiful.
I love it. I think it's so beautiful. So I'm curious, as we enter this new season, and so many of us, I think, are probably looking for this sort of sense of soul connection to the things that we love, the people, the places, everything else in between. How do you recommend people start to bring in the joy of sanctuary in this season, either into their lives or their homes? You've given so many beautiful tips, but if someone is really focused on the joy of it all, where do you suggest that where do they start?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I might link this back to the sanctuary languages if that's
Yeah,
okay at this stage.
absolutely.
Yeah, so all of these ideas will work for everybody, but just specifically for each language, I think it might be nice just to
Oh, I
share
love that. Yes,
a couple
please.
of
I
tips.
love
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Yes.
So for the quiet solitude person, they really need to accept an invitation to get out of their head right about now.
Hmm, hmm.
So it's been a big year already. We're halfway through it. Get out of your head and get outside, because a quiet solitude person can be very isolating, very introverted, removed from society, and that's
Hmm.
okay. I totally get it. But get out of your head and get into nature, quiet solitude person. That'll be really helpful for you coming into this season. The physical activity person could be tricky depending on where they're at on their physical activity journey, but I want them to pause and slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Still keep your physical activity up, but just an invitation to pause and slow down a little bit, just so that you can take that breath, as you've already said, Sydney, and maybe welcome in new opportunities or new things that aren't there because perhaps your timetable's too rigid around
Hmm.
your movements. Connection and collaboration. I want to invite these beautiful souls to breathe, to reflect, and to open up to new opportunities. So the breathing and the reflecting, the stepping back will then allow whatever those new opportunities to come through. And the creativity person, when I was sitting with this, I thought this is the vision that came to me was standing somewhere in nature where you can look at a far distance. So you might be on a cliff looking out towards the ocean, or a mountain looking, and you're up high and you're looking quite a distance out.
Hmm.
So, in other words, a creative person, I want you to try and expand your horizons a little bit, to get a broader picture of what's going on for you personally, professionally, spiritually, emotionally, so that when you step back into that creative space, you're more in flow.
I love all of these tips because, no matter where you're at in your sanctuary journey, I think it's just good advice. Breathe. Breathe. We all need to breathe more in this new season. And especially as we allow ourselves, I think, to connect deeper with ourselves, and then also with others. And I keep coming back to this infinity symbol that you spoke about earlier, and how no matter your sanctuary language or the two that you identify with the most, we are constantly, moving through this cycle within ourselves. And there are going to be highs and there are going to be lows, and you will just continue to move through it. And so I just love the tips you shared. And I just think this simple of the infinity symbol, keeping it in mind this season too, is going to be really powerful, because we're going to have lots of movement, in new and different ways, more so than we've had in the last year. It's going to be
Yeah.
really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Helen, I have loved having this conversation with you for our summer series, and really talking about sanctuary, which for me just really feels like what you shared about cultivating a soul connection for yourself with things that you resonate with, people, places, because ultimately, the more that we connect so deeply with ourselves and then with others, I feel like that's where the transformation takes place. And that's where that really ability to get to know yourself, and get to know your likes and your dislikes and your preferences and everything else in between is really powerful. So, anything else about sanctuary that we didn't talk about that you're like, oh, we got to touch on? I feel like we really went deep here about just how we can invite the joy of sanctuary and these practices into our lives, but just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, we kind of blitzed through a lot of stuff there.
We
So that
did.
was, that was really good. I think I just want to give people an invitation just to really sit with this stuff. This is a way to create a change. And if you don't know what that change is, it doesn't matter. That's where I was at on my journey many years ago. I didn't know where I wanted to be, what the finish line looked like. But now I know it doesn't actually matter what the finish line looks like, because I showed up, I backed myself, I did the work.
Mm.
And because we all go through really tricky phases in our lives. And if we can just use this beautiful concept to help us step forward little by little every single day, the effort is 100,000% worth it.
I'm so glad you said that, because you don't need to know the destination. You don't need to know where you're going. You don't need to know how it's going to end up. And that's not easy. Like, that sense of releasing control for yourself is not easy. But if you show up for yourself, and for all of us, it's going to look different. But if you can continue to show up for yourself, that's really where the magic is. Absolutely. Oh, I love this. I love this. Okay, Helen, tell everybody that's listening where they can find you, connect, learn more. And then I know you're also offering something for Seek the Joy Summer attendees. So share with them what that's all about too.
Yeah, beautiful. So the best place to find me is on my website, which is helenjoybutler.com, and Facebook and Instagram if you're there. And for the beautiful people who sign up for your series, we've got a Sanctuary Starter Kit if they'd love to collect that. In the kit is a video, it's nearly an hour long, of me sharing all these sanctuary basics with you. And then there's a couple of meditations as well to support that process of discovering what is sanctuary, what does it look like for me, and how do I step forward with it. So please do grab that gift if it resonates with
Oh
you.
my gosh, please do, because I think there's so much more to our conversation that we didn't even get to. Because I love when you're like, we blitzed through it. I'm like, I know, we totally did. But just the ability to connect with yourself and tap into these meditations Helen is sharing in her starter kit, I think is so, so beautiful. All right. Well, Helen, thank you so much for this conversation. This was all about inviting the joy of sanctuary. But I think my biggest takeaway is that when you invite sanctuary into your life, it's just an opportunity to get to know yourself and really nourish yourself in a way that I think we need. So thank you. This was wonderful.
You're welcome.